She brought her only son to her friend's wedding, just to see her billionaire CEO ex, the son's father. 7 years, Vivian. The boy is 7 years old. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the garden air like broken glass. His hands were shaking. The kind of trembling that comes when your entire world has just shattered and you're trying to hold the pieces together with bleeding fingers. Don't do this here. Vivian's voice cracked. Tears were already streaming down her face, smearing the makeup she'd applied so carefully that morning. The makeup she'd chosen thinking it would give her courage. Do this here? Do this here? You kept my son from me for 7 years and you're worried about where we have this conversation? His voice was rising now. Several wedding guests turned their heads toward the secluded garden alcove where they stood. Marcus, please. I can explain everything. Just please lower your voice. Elijah might hear you and he doesn't know yet. He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand? Marcus laughed. It was a hollow, broken sound. Of course he doesn't understand. How could he? His father is a stranger. A man who missed every birthday, every first step, every nightmare, every moment that mattered. Tell me, Vivienne, does he even know my name? The silence between them was deafening. That's what I thought. Have you ever made a decision that saved someone you loved but destroyed your own chance at happiness? Have you ever carried a secret so heavy it changed the shape of your spine, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the way you breathe? Vivienne Monroe had. For 7 years, she'd carried the weight of a truth that could change 3 lives forever. And today, standing at her best friend's wedding with her son's hand in hers, she was finally ready to let that burden drop. But she had no idea that the impact would shatter everything she'd carefully built. This is a story about the lies we tell for love, the prices we pay for silence. And the courage it takes to face the truth when facing it might cost you everything. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question every choice you've ever made in the name of protecting someone you love. 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning in Boston, Vivienne Monroe stood in her sunlit kitchen staring at an ivory envelope. The morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate shadows across the hardwood floors of her brownstone apartment. Steam rose from her untouched coffee. Outside, the sounds of the city waking up created a familiar symphony. Car horns, distant sirens, the coffee shop on the corner grinding beans for the morning rush. But inside, in this moment, the world had narrowed to one single piece of cardstock. Isabel Moreau and David Chen request the honor of your presence at their wedding. The words blurred as Vivienne read them for the 15th time that morning. It wasn't the wedding that made her hands tremble. It was the location. Newport, Rhode Island. It was the date. June 15th. It was the small detail Isabel had mentioned during their phone call last week. Said so casually, as if the information wouldn't detonate like a bomb in Vivienne's carefully constructed life. Marcus is David's best man. Can you believe it? After all these years, you two will finally see each other again. Won't that be something? Yes. It would be something. Mama? The voice pulled her back. Vivienne turned to find her son standing in the kitchen doorway, his dark hair sleep-tousled, his gray eyes still heavy with dreams. Elijah. Her entire world contained in 3.5 feet of boundless energy and impossible questions. Good morning, sweetheart. She slipped the invitation beneath a stack of mail and opened her arms. Elijah ran into them the way he always did. Full force, no hesitation, complete trust. 7 years old and already so brave. So much braver than she'd ever been. Why do you look sad? I'm not sad, baby. Just thinking. About what? Elijah pulled back to study her face. He had a way of looking at people that was unnerving in its intensity, as if he could see past the masks adults wore, past the careful words to the truth underneath. About a wedding. My friend Isabel is getting married and she invited us. A wedding? Elijah's eyes lit up. With cake? Vivienne laughed despite the anxiety coiling in her chest. Yes, lots of cake. Can I wear a suit? Like a real suit with a tie? If you want to. I want to. Elijah was already moving toward the refrigerator, his mind shifting the way children's minds do, from one thought to the next like skipping stones across water. Can we have pancakes? We can have whatever you want. As Elijah chattered about his preferences, chocolate chips versus blueberries, Vivienne moved through the familiar motions of breakfast, mixing batter, heating the griddle, setting out syrup and butter. Her hands knew what to do, even as her mind spun in circles. 8, years. It had been 8 years since she'd seen Marcus Ashford. 8 years since she'd walked away from the only man she'd ever loved. 8 years since she'd told the lie that had saved his empire and broken both their hearts. And he had no idea that the consequence of their love was currently sitting at her kitchen table, arguing with himself about whether chocolate chips counted as a breakfast food. "Mama, chocolate is made from cocoa beans. Beans are healthy. Therefore, chocolate chips are healthy. That's logic. That's interesting logic. So can I have extra?" "You can have a normal amount." Elijah accepted this with a dramatic sigh that made Vivienne smile. He was so much like Marcus, it sometimes hurt to look at him. The gray eyes, the way his brow furrowed when he was thinking, the stubborn set of his jaw when he'd made up his mind about something. Even his hands, long-fingered and expressive, were Marcus's hands in miniature. Every day, Elijah looked more like the man who didn't know he existed. After breakfast, after Elijah had been bundled off to school with his backpack and lunchbox and a kiss on the forehead, Vivienne returned to the kitchen. She pulled out the invitation again, ran her fingers over the embossed lettering, made the decision she'd been avoiding for 3 months. She was going to attend the wedding, and she was bringing Elijah, and she was going to tell Marcus the truth. The decision settled over her like a weight and a relief at the same time. For 7 years, she'd told herself she was protecting everyone. Marcus from the scandal and complications of an unplanned child. Elijah from a father who might resent his existence. Herself from the rejection she was certain would come. But protection had started to feel like cowardice. And Elijah's questions about his father were becoming harder to deflect. "Where is my dad? Do I have a dad? Why don't I have a dad like other kids?" The standard answer, "Your father had important work to do," was wearing thin. Soon, Elijah would be old enough to understand what she'd done, old enough to ask why she'd made the choice for him, why she'd decided he didn't deserve to know his own father. Vivienne picked up her phone, dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Her mother answered on the 3rd ring. "Vivi, is everything okay?" "Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm going to Isabel's wedding, and I'm bringing Elijah." The silence on the other end was heavy with understanding. Catherine Monroe was the only person who knew the whole truth. The only one who'd held Vivienne's hand through the pregnancy, the birth, the endless nights of doubt and regret. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "What changed?" "Elijah drew a picture yesterday. At school, the teacher asked them to draw their family. He drew himself, he drew me, and then he drew this blank space where a father should be. Just empty space, Mom. And when I asked him about it, he said, 'I can't draw someone I've never seen.'" Catherine's breath caught. "Oh, Vivi. He deserves to know his father, and Marcus deserves to know his son. I was wrong to keep them apart. I thought I was being noble, but I was just being scared. Marcus will be angry. Marcus will be furious. He has every right to be. But maybe, if I'm lucky, eventually he'll understand. And if not, at least I'll have tried to make it right. What if he wants custody? What if he tries to take Elijah from you?" The fear that had haunted Vivienne for 7 years, spoken aloud. "Then I'll deal with it. But I can't keep lying. Not to Elijah, not to Marcus, not to myself." After the call ended, Vivienne sat in the quiet of her kitchen and let herself remember. Let herself travel back 8 years to the person she used to be. She'd been 24, fresh out of art school with a degree in illustration and dreams bigger than her talent. Working as a teacher's aide at an elementary school by day and taking freelance design jobs at night. Barely making rent on a studio apartment in Brooklyn. Wearing thrift store clothes and eating ramen more nights than not. But happy, hopeful, convinced that hard work and passion were enough to build a life. The gallery opening had been a fluke. One of Vivienne's former professors had invited her to the opening reception for a new contemporary art space in Manhattan. Vivienne almost hadn't gone. She'd worked a double shift that day covering for a sick colleague and was exhausted. But something, intuition or fate, or plain stubborn hope, had made her change into her one good dress and take the subway into the city. The gallery was everything she aspired to. White walls, track lighting, sophisticated people holding wine glasses and discussing composition in negative space. Vivienne had felt completely out of place and entirely at home at the same time. She'd been standing in front of a massive abstract painting, trying to decode the artist's intention, when a voice beside her said, "I think it's supposed to be a dragon. Or possibly a tax return. I honestly can't tell." Vivian had turned to find a man about her age, tall and lean in an expensive suit that looked slightly uncomfortable on him, as if he wasn't used to formal clothes. Dark hair, gray eyes that held intelligence and humor in equal measure, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I think it's a commentary on urban isolation." "Really?" He'd tilted his head, studying the painting with exaggerated seriousness. "I'm not seeing it." "The figure here," Vivian pointed, "is fractured, disconnected from the background. See how the colors don't quite touch? It's about being surrounded by millions of people but still fundamentally alone." He'd stepped closer to the painting, then back, then closer again. Nope. Still looks like a dragon doing his taxes. Vivian had laughed. She couldn't help it, and that laugh had changed everything. They'd spent the next 3 hours talking, first about art, then about everything else. She'd learned his name was Marcus Ashford, that he worked in real estate development, that he'd come to the gallery opening because his business partner's wife was friends with the gallery owner and he'd been voluntold to attend, that he found most contemporary art pretentious but loved architecture, that he'd grown up in Connecticut in a family that valued success over happiness and was still trying to figure out which one he wanted to pursue. Vivian had told him about her illustration dreams, her job at the elementary school, her tiny apartment with the broken heater and the view of a brick wall, her family back in Boston, her father's gambling debts that had destroyed their finances when she was a teenager, her determination to build a life that was hers, earned, not given. When the gallery closed, Marcus had asked if she wanted to get coffee. Coffee had turned into dinner at a small Italian place in the West Village. Dinner had turned into a walk through Washington Square Park. The walk had turned into standing on a street corner at 2 a.m, neither of them wanting to say goodbye. "Can I see you again?" Marcus had asked. "When?" "Tomorrow?" Vivian had smiled. Tomorrow works. Tomorrow had led to the next day, and the next, and the next. Within a month, they were inseparable. Within 2 months, Vivian was in love in a way she hadn't known was possible. The kind of love that feels like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. Marcus was different from anyone she'd ever known. Brilliant and driven, yes, but also kind, thoughtful. He remembered small things she mentioned in passing. Her favorite flower, lilies. Her coffee order. The fact that she loved thunderstorms but was afraid of the dark. He showed up at her school one afternoon with art supplies for her classroom, because she'd mentioned the budget was tight. He sat through terrible independent films she wanted to see and pretended to enjoy them. He made her laugh, made her feel seen. But there were shadows, too. The pressure from his family to take over the Ashford real estate empire. His older brother Richard, the current CFO, who seemed to resent Marcus's rising prominence in the company. The board members who thought Marcus was too young, too idealistic, too different from his father. The expectations that felt like chains. Vivian had been his escape from all that. The one place where he could just be Marcus, not Marcus Ashford, heir to billions. In her tiny apartment with the broken heater, he was happy, free. For 6 months, they'd existed in a bubble. A perfect, fragile bubble where love was enough and the future could be dealt with later. Then the bubble burst. It had started with small comments from Marcus's colleagues, questions about who he was dating, raised eyebrows when they appeared together at company events, whispers about whether she was appropriate for someone in his position. Vivian had tried to ignore it, but the doubts crept in. She wasn't from his world. Didn't have the right background, the right education, the right anything. And then Richard had called her. It was a Thursday evening. Marcus was in Philadelphia for meetings. Vivian was in her apartment working on illustrations for a children's book, her first real commission. Her phone had rung with an unknown number. "Miss Monroe? This is Richard Ashford, Marcus's brother. I think we need to have a conversation." The meeting had been at a sterile coffee shop in Midtown. Richard had arrived in a suit that probably cost more than Vivian's monthly rent. He'd ordered an espresso. Hadn't touched it. Had looked at her with cold assessment. "You seem like a smart woman, so I'm going to be direct. My brother is on the verge of a major acquisition. Ashford Enterprises is about to finalize a deal that will double our market position. The board is watching everything Marcus does. Everything. They need to have complete confidence in his judgment." "What does this have to do with me?" Richard had slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs. Her father entering a casino. Documents detailing his gambling debts, some over a decade old. Articles about her younger brother's arrest for drug possession when he was 19, charges later dropped. Her mother's bankruptcy filing from 15 years ago. Your family has certain vulnerabilities. If these were to become public, if the wrong people started asking questions about Marcus's connections, it could derail everything. The board is already skeptical. This would confirm their worst fears that Marcus lacks judgment. Vivian's hands had trembled as she closed the folder. This is blackmail! This is protection. For everyone. You love Marcus, don't you? Yes. Then you understand that he's worked his entire life to build something meaningful. This acquisition will allow him to implement his vision. Affordable housing developments. Sustainable architecture. All the things he talks about. But if this falls apart because of scandal, because the board loses confidence, he loses everything. Not just the deal, his position, his future, everything. What do you want me to do? Richard's smile had been thin. End the relationship. Quietly. Tell him you've met someone else. Move away. I'll ensure your apartment lease is covered for a year. Your student loans paid off. Consider it a severance package. I won't take your money. Fine. Then do it because you love him. Because you know, deep down, that you're not the right fit for his life. That eventually, he'll have to choose between you and his career. And when he chooses his career, because he will, you'll both be hurt far worse than if you end it now. The words had found their mark because they echoed Vivian's deepest fears. The fears she'd been pushing down for months. That she wasn't enough. That Marcus would wake up one day and realize he'd sacrificed too much for someone too ordinary. If I do this, you leave my family alone. You have my word. Your secrets stay buried. Your family stays protected. Vivian had walked out of that coffee shop feeling like she was moving through water. Thick, heavy water that made every step an effort. She'd gone home, sat in the dark, and made a choice she thought was selfless. Looking back now, 8 years later, she could see it for what it was. Cowardice dressed up as sacrifice. 3 days after meeting with Richard, Vivian had called Marcus, asked him to come over. Rehearsed the lies until they sounded almost true. When Marcus had arrived, smiling, carrying Thai takeout because he knew she'd been working long hours, Vivian had barely been able to look at him. We need to talk. She'd watched his expression shift from happy to concerned. Watched him set down the food and sit beside her on the couch, reaching for her hand. What's wrong? Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. I can't do this anymore. Us. This relationship. What? The confusion in his voice had almost broken her resolve. I've been thinking a lot about what I want, where my life is going, and I don't think we're right for each other. Vivian, where is this coming from? Last week you were talking about moving in together. I know, but I've realized I was getting caught up in the fantasy. You're not who I thought you were. The lies had tasted like poison. I don't understand. Did something happen? Did I do something? It's not about you. It's about me. I've met someone else. The silence that followed had been crushing. You've met someone else. It had been a statement, not a question. And the pain in Marcus's eyes had been unbearable. When? It doesn't matter when. It just happened. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Marcus had stood then, paced to the window, stood with his back to her for a long moment. When he turned around, his expression was carefully blank. Is this real? Or is someone pressuring you? For one moment, one brief shining moment, Vivian had almost told him the truth. Almost explained about Richard, about the threats, about her fears. But Richard's words echoed. He'll have to choose between you and his career. And when he chooses his career, you'll both be hurt far worse. It's real. I'm sorry, Marcus. I wish things were different. If you loved me at all, he'd said quietly, just tell me the truth. I am telling you the truth. The lie had sealed their fate. Marcus had left without another word. The next day, Vivian had gotten on a bus to Boston with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. She'd moved into her mother's spare room, found a job doing illustrations for a small publishing house, started building a new life from the wreckage of the old one. 3 weeks later, she'd missed her period. Another week, and she'd taken the test. 2 pink lines that changed everything. She'd sat on the bathroom floor of her mother's house, test in hand, and understood what she'd done. She'd walked away to protect Marcus's future, but now his child was growing inside her. Now the choice wasn't just about her anymore. She could call him, tell him, give him the option to be involved, but the acquisition was still happening. Richard's threats still stood, and now there was more at stake. A child who would be caught in the middle. A child whose existence could be used as leverage, as scandal, as proof of Marcus's poor judgment. Or she could raise the baby alone. Keep Marcus's secret along with her own. Let him build his empire without complications. Give her child a quiet life, free from the pressure and scrutiny that came with the Ashford name. Vivian had chosen silence, and for 7 years that silence had held. But now, standing in her Boston kitchen with Isabel's wedding invitation in her hand and Elijah's questions echoing in her mind, the silence felt less like protection and more like theft. She'd stolen 7 years from Marcus, 7 years from Elijah, 7 years of a relationship that should have existed. No more. Vivian picked up her phone and texted Isabel. "We'll be there. Looking forward to celebrating with you." The response came quickly. "I'm so glad. Can't wait to see you." And to introduce Elijah to everyone. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, another message. "Marcus asks about you sometimes. I think he'll be happy to see you." Vivian stared at the words. Marcus asks about you sometimes. What did that mean? That he still thought about her? That he'd forgiven her? That he hated her? Only one way to find out. The next 3 months passed in a blur of preparation and second-guessing. Vivienne threw herself into work, finishing a series of illustrations for a middle-grade novel about a boy searching for his lost father. The irony wasn't lost on her. She took Elijah shopping for his first real suit, watching him preen in front of the mirror with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. She practiced conversations with Marcus in her head, trying to find the right words to explain the unexplainable. Elijah's excitement about the wedding grew by the day. He'd never been to Newport, never stayed in a fancy hotel, never attended an event where he needed a suit and tie. For him, it was an adventure. He had no idea it was also a reckoning. The night before they left, Vivian lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her suitcase was packed. Elijah's suit hung in a garment bag by the door. The car rental was confirmed. Everything was ready. Except her. What if Marcus refused to believe her? What if he thought she was lying, trying to trap him? What if he wanted nothing to do with Elijah? What if he wanted to take Elijah away from her? What if? What if? What if? The fears spiraled until she got up, went to Elijah's room, and watched him sleep. His face was peaceful in the glow of his nightlight. One arm flung over his head. His breathing deep and even. So trusting. So innocent. He deserved a father. Whatever else happened, that truth was fundamental. Elijah deserved the chance to know Marcus. And Marcus deserved the chance to know his son. Vivian's fears didn't get to stand in the way of that anymore. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered to her sleeping child. "I promise." The drive to Newport took 3 hours. Elijah chattered the entire way, asking questions about the wedding, about Newport, about whether they'd see the ocean. Vivian answered on autopilot, her mind already miles ahead, already standing face to face with the man she'd never stopped loving. The venue was the Rosecliff Mansion, a Gilded Age masterpiece overlooking the Atlantic. As Vivian pulled up the long drive, the mansion rose before them like something from a fairy tale. White limestone, manicured gardens, the ocean sparkling in the background. "Whoa!" Elijah breathed. "This is where the wedding is?" "This is it. It looks like a castle." "It kind of is." They checked into their hotel room first, a boutique inn a few miles from the mansion. The wedding wasn't until tomorrow, but there was a welcome reception this evening. Cocktails and hors d'oeuvres on the mansion's terrace. Casual, Isabel had said, just a chance for guests to mingle before the big day. Which meant Marcus would be there. Which meant in approximately 4 hours, Vivian would see him for the first time in 8 years. 4 hours to prepare for a conversation she'd been rehearsing for months. 4 hours until her carefully constructed life either healed or collapsed completely. "Mama, you're shaking." Vivian looked down. Elijah was right. Her hands were trembling as she tried to unpack their suitcases. "I'm just excited, sweetheart." "Me too." Elijah bounced on the hotel bed, already making himself at home. "Can we go to the beach before the party?" "We can walk on the beach for a little while." They spent an hour on the sand. Elijah running ahead to examine shells and seaweed, while Vivian walked behind, trying to calm her racing heart. The ocean stretched endless and gray-blue. Waves crashed with rhythmic certainty. The salt air cleared her head but did nothing for her nerves. By the time they returned to the hotel to change, Vivian felt like she might vibrate out of her skin. She helped Elijah into khakis and a button-down shirt, combed his hair, which immediately fell back into its usual tousled state, straightened his collar twice. "You look very handsome." "I look fancy." "Fancy and handsome." Vivian had chosen her own outfit carefully. A simple dress in deep emerald, elegant but not flashy. Pearl earrings her mother had given her. Low heels, hair down in loose waves, minimal makeup. She wanted to look like herself, not like she was trying too hard or trying to impress anyone. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman on the edge of changing her entire life, and she looked terrified. "It's going to be okay," she told her reflection. "You can do this." The reception was already in full swing when they arrived. The mansion's terrace overlooked manicured gardens that descended in terraces toward the ocean. White-clothed tables held champagne flutes and elaborate flower arrangements. Guests mingled in clusters, their laughter carried on the evening breeze. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Vivian stood at the edge of the terrace, Elijah's hand in hers, and scanned the crowd. She didn't see Marcus, didn't know if she was relieved or disappointed. "Vivian!" Isabel appeared like a vision in a flowing white cocktail dress, her face radiant with pre-wedding joy. She pulled Vivian into a tight hug. "You made it. I'm so happy you're here. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you." Isabel pulled back and looked down at Elijah with warm interest. And this must be the famous Elijah I've heard so much about. Elijah, suddenly shy, pressed closer to Vivian's side. "Say hello to Miss Isabel, sweetheart." "Hello. It's wonderful to meet you, Elijah. Are you excited about the wedding? Will there be cake?" Isabel laughed. "Lots of cake. 3 different kinds." This seemed to satisfy Elijah, who nodded approvingly. "Come, let me introduce you to David." Isabel linked her arm through Vivian's and guided them toward a group near the balcony railing. "And Marcus is around here somewhere. He was asking about you earlier." Vivian's heart lurched. "Was he? I think he's been curious. It's been such a long time." "Yes, it has." They reached the group, and Isabel made introductions. David Chen was warm and welcoming, shaking Vivian's hand with genuine friendliness, and crouching down to talk to Elijah about whether he preferred chocolate or vanilla cake. Other guests cycled through. Conversations flowed. Vivian smiled and nodded and made appropriate responses while her awareness stayed attuned to the crowd, waiting. And then she saw him. Marcus stood near the French doors leading into the mansion, a glass of champagne in his hand, laughing at something the woman beside him had said. 8 years had changed him. The boyishness was gone, replaced by something more refined, more polished. His dark suit fit him perfectly. His hair, still dark but with hints of silver at the temples now, was styled with casual elegance. He'd grown into himself, into his power. But his eyes were the same. Those gray eyes that had once looked at her like she was his whole world. As if sensing her stare, Marcus turned. Their gazes locked across the crowded terrace. Vivian watched the recognition dawn, watched his expression shift from casual interest to shock to something she couldn't quite name. The conversation around him faded. He said something to the woman beside him, excused himself, and started walking toward Vivian with focused intensity. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading and longing for, in equal measure. Marcus was crossing the terrace, and in seconds he would be standing in front of her, and she would have to speak, and she had no idea what to say because all her rehearsed words had vanished like smoke. Then Elijah tugged on her dress. "Mama, I need the bathroom." "What?" "The bathroom. I need to go." Of course he did. Vivian tore her gaze from Marcus and looked down at her son. "Okay, sweetheart, let's find one." She scooped Elijah up, even though he was getting too big for this, and turned deliberately away from Marcus's approach, headed toward the mansion's interior. She could feel his stare burning into her back, could sense his confusion, his questions forming. She had maybe minutes before the inevitable confrontation. The mansion's interior was cool and quiet after the terrace's warmth. Vivian found a restroom, waited while Elijah used it, helped him wash his hands. When they emerged, she knew she couldn't delay any longer. She had to go back out there, had to face him. But when they returned to the terrace, Marcus was waiting. He stood near the French doors, clearly positioned to intercept them. His expression was carefully controlled, but his eyes held a storm of emotions. There was no avoiding this, no running anymore. Vivian set Elijah down and walked toward the man who had never stopped haunting her dreams. Elijah's hand was warm in hers, a tether to reality, a reminder of what was at stake. Marcus watched them approach. His gaze shifted from Vivian to Elijah and back again. And in that moment, Vivian saw him doing the math, saw the realization beginning to form. Vivian! Her name on his lips after 8 years of silence. "Hello, Marcus!" His eyes dropped again to Elijah. Stayed there, taking in details. The gray eyes, the familiar features, the age that was impossible to ignore. "I need to talk to you," Marcus said quietly. His voice was steady, but she could hear the effort it took to maintain that steadiness. "I know. Now." Vivian looked around at the crowded reception. Guests everywhere. Isabel and David hosting. This wasn't the place. But Marcus's expression said he didn't care. "Elijah, sweetheart, can you go sit at that table over there? Mama needs to talk to this gentleman for just a minute. But I want to stay with you. I'll be right there, I promise. You can see me the whole time." Elijah looked uncertain but obedient. He walked to the nearby table and climbed into a chair, his eyes never leaving Vivienne. Marcus waited until Elijah was out of earshot, then turned to her with barely leashed intensity. "How old is he?" The question she'd known was coming. The question that would start everything. 7. 7. He repeated the word like he was testing it, like he was trying to make it make sense, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "Vivienne, please tell me I'm wrong. Please tell me that child isn't mine." But Vivian couldn't tell him that, because it would be another lie. And she was done with lies. "His name is Elijah. And yes, Marcus, he's yours." The words hung in the air between them like shattered glass. "Yes, Marcus, he's yours." For a moment, Marcus didn't move, didn't speak. He just stared at her with an expression that cycled through disbelief, shock, and something that looked like grief. Then his jaw tightened. "We need to talk, now. Somewhere private." "Marcus! Don't say my name like that. Don't stand there looking sorry when you've had 7 years to tell me and chose not to." His voice was low, controlled, but Vivienne could hear the fury beneath it. The kind of anger that comes from betrayal so deep it changes the architecture of your soul. "There's a garden," Vivienne gestured toward the side of the mansion. "Beyond those hedges, we can talk there. Get someone to watch him." Marcus wouldn't even look at Elijah now, as if looking would make it too real, too overwhelming. Vivienne caught Isabel's eye across the terrace and waved her over. When Isabel arrived, smiling and oblivious, Vivienne forced brightness into her voice. "Could you watch Elijah for just a few minutes? I need to speak with Marcus about something." "Of course." Isabel looked between them, clearly sensing tension but too polite to ask. "Come on, Elijah. Want to help me check on the dessert table?" Elijah looked to Vivienne for permission. She nodded, even though every instinct screamed to keep him close, to protect him from what was coming. "Go ahead, sweetheart. I'll be right back." As Isabel led Elijah away, chattering about cake flavors, Marcus turned and walked toward the garden without waiting to see if Vivienne would follow. She did, of course. This was the reckoning she'd come here for, the confrontation she deserved. The garden was secluded, enclosed by tall hedges that blocked the view from the terrace. A stone fountain burbled in the center. Evening light filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of gold and shadow. It might have been romantic under different circumstances. Now it felt like a courtroom. Marcus stopped near the fountain and turned to face her. His composure was cracking. She could see it in the way his hands shook, the way his breath came uneven. 7 years. The words came out rough. "The boy is 7 years old." "Yes. And you never thought to tell me? In 7 years, it never once occurred to you that I might want to know I had a son?" "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple." Marcus's voice rose. "Explain to me how you justify keeping my child from me for 7 years. Explain how that's anything other than cruel." "I was protecting you." "From what? From being a father? From having a family? From Richard? From the scandal? From losing everything you'd worked for. Marcus stared at her like she was speaking another language. What are you talking about? So Vivian told him. Everything. The coffee shop meeting with Richard. The threats. The folder full of her family's secrets. The ultimatum. The choice she'd made to walk away and lie about meeting someone else. The pregnancy she discovered weeks later. The decision to raise Elijah alone rather than complicate Marcus's life. With each word, she watched Marcus's expression shift. Anger giving way to shock. Shock giving way to something darker. Richard threatened you. It wasn't a question. Yes. And you believed him. You believed he would destroy my company, expose your family, ruin everything. He had files, Marcus. Detailed files. He knew things about my father's gambling debts that I didn't even know. He knew about my brother's arrest. He had leverage. So you ran. Marcus's voice was hollow now. Instead of coming to me, instead of trusting me to handle my own brother, you just ran. What was I supposed to do? You were in the middle of the biggest acquisition of your career. The board was already skeptical of you. If I'd stayed, if the truth about my background had come out, Richard would have used it to destroy your credibility. You don't know that, don't I? Vivian's own anger was surfacing now. You told me yourself how precarious your position was, how every decision was being scrutinized, how one wrong move could cost you everything. I heard you on the phone with your father, Marcus. I heard you say that you couldn't afford any distractions, that you had to stay focused. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating from every line of his body. That was about work, about keeping boundaries between my personal life and the company. It wasn't about you being a distraction. How was I supposed to know that? How was I supposed to know anything when your brother showed up with threats and evidence and a very clear picture of what my presence in your life would cost you? You were supposed to trust me. Marcus's voice broke. You were supposed to come to me and tell me what was happening and let me decide how to handle it. Instead, you made the choice for me. You decided I wasn't capable of protecting both you and my career. You decided I wasn't worthy of even knowing the truth. I was 24 years old and terrified. Vivian's tears were flowing freely now. I was in love with you, and convinced that love wasn't enough to overcome the reality of our different worlds. When Richard threatened me, it confirmed every fear I already had, that I didn't belong in your life, that eventually you'd have to choose. So I chose for you. And 3 weeks later, you found out you were pregnant. Yes. And you still didn't tell me. What would you have done, Marcus? Honestly, if I'd called you and said I was pregnant, what would you have done? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. I would have been terrified and overwhelmed and probably completely unprepared. But I would have shown up. I would have been there for you, for our child. I would have figured it out because that's what you do when you love someone. You don't know that. You don't know how you would have reacted because we'll never know. I made a choice based on the information I had and the fears I carried. Was it the right choice? No. I know that now. But at the time, I thought I was doing the noble thing, the selfless thing. There's nothing noble about keeping a father from his child. Marcus's anger was returning, hot and sharp. You didn't just hurt me, Vivienne. You hurt him, too. Every time he asked about his father, every time he wondered why he didn't have a dad like other kids, that was because of your choice. The words landed like blows. Vivienne had thought the same thing 1,000 times, but hearing it from Marcus made it unbearable. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know, and I can't take it back. I can't give you those 7 years. All I can do is tell you the truth now and hope that it's not too late to build something for his sake. For his sake. Marcus looked toward the terrace, where somewhere beyond the hedges, their son was eating cake with a stranger who'd been kind enough to watch him. Does he know? About me? He knows he has a father. He asks about you constantly. I told him you had important work to do. Important work? Marcus laughed bitterly. Is that what you tell him when he asks why his father isn't there for birthdays? For school events? For all the moments that matter? What would you have me say? The truth? That his mother was too afraid and too proud to give his father a chance? That I made a decision that stole 7 years from both of you? Yes. Marcus turned to face her fully. You should tell him the truth. Because he deserves to know. Just like I deserve to know. They stood in silence. the weight of 7 years of secrets pressing down on both of them. The fountain continued its gentle burbling. Somewhere distant, music and laughter floated from the reception. The world continuing on, while theirs imploded. "What happens now?" Vivienne finally asked. Marcus shook his head slowly. "I have no idea. I've been standing here for the last 10 minutes finding out I'm a father, and I don't have any idea what to do with that information." "Do you want to meet him? Properly, I mean. Do you want to spend time with him?" "Of course I want to spend time with him. He's my son." Marcus's voice cracked on the last word. "But Vivienne, I don't know how to be a father. I don't know what to say to a 7-year-old. I don't know how to just walk into his life and pretend the last 7 years didn't happen." "You don't pretend. You start where you are. You get to know him. You let him get to know you. And then what? We share custody? I take him every other weekend? Like some divorced couple? How does this work when we're strangers and he doesn't even know who I am?" "That's why we tell him. Tonight or tomorrow. Together. We sit him down and we tell him the truth. Or as much of it as he can understand at 7 years old." Marcus was quiet, processing. Finally, he asked, "What's he like?" The question seemed to pain him. 7 years of not knowing, condensed into 3 words. Vivienne smiled despite her tears. "He's brilliant, creative. He loves drawing, like I do. He asks a million questions about everything. He's kind to other kids. He's obsessed with dinosaurs and space and how things work. He has your eyes, your hands, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking. He's so much like you it sometimes hurts to look at him." Marcus's composure finally broke completely. He sat down hard on the edge of the fountain, his head in his hands. Vivienne watched him cry and felt her own heart shatter all over again. This was the cost of her choices. This moment. Marcus grieving for the years he'd lost with a child he didn't know existed. "I'm so sorry." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. "Marcus, I am so sorry. For all of it. For not trusting you. For running. For keeping Elijah from you. For every birthday and first step and moment you missed. I can't undo it. I can't give you back what I took. But I can give you the truth now. I can give you a chance to know your son." Marcus looked up at her, his face wet with tears. "Why now? After 7 years, why tell me now?" "Because Elijah drew a picture at school. A picture of his family and where his father should have been. There was just empty space. And I realized that I'd created that emptiness. That I'd robbed him of something fundamental, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep lying to him, to you, to myself." "So, you brought him to the wedding?" "I brought him to the wedding. I knew you'd be here. I knew this would happen, and I was terrified. But I came anyway because it was time. Past time." Marcus stood slowly, wiping his face with his hands. "I need to meet him. Really meet him. Not as some stranger at a wedding, but as his father." "Okay? But I'm still angry, Vivienne. I'm furious. At you, at Richard, at the situation. That doesn't just go away because we had a conversation." "I know, and you have every right to be angry. But can you put that aside long enough to get to know Elijah? Can you be angry at me and still be present for him?" Marcus met her eyes. "For him? Yes." He paused. "What do we tell him? Right now, I mean. He saw us come out here. He's going to ask questions. We tell him you're an old friend, that we needed to catch up. Tomorrow, after the wedding, we'll sit him down and tell him everything. And if he hates me for being absent, then we deal with that together. But Marcus, I've seen the drawings. I've heard the questions. I know my son. He's been waiting his whole life to meet you. He's not going to hate you." They walked back to the reception together, maintaining careful distance. The sun had set fully now, and the terrace was lit by strings of fairy lights that made everything look magical and unreal. Vivienne spotted Elijah immediately. He was still with Isabel, showing her something on his hands, probably explaining some complicated game he'd invented. When Elijah saw Vivienne, he ran over. "Mama, Miss Isabel is really nice. She let me have 2 pieces of cake." "I see that." Vivienne wiped a smudge of chocolate from his chin. Elijah looked up at Marcus with curious eyes. "Are you done talking?" "We are." Vivienne's hand found Elijah's shoulder. "Sweetheart, this is Marcus. He's an old friend of Mama's." Marcus crouched down to Elijah's level, making himself smaller, less intimidating. "It's very nice to meet you, Elijah." Hi. Elijah studied Marcus with a frank assessment of children. You're tall. I am. Do you play basketball? Not very well. Me neither. I like soccer better. Marcus smiled, and Vivian saw a glimpse of the man she'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. Soccer is a great game. Do you know about dinosaurs? Some. Not as much as you, probably. I know a lot about dinosaurs. Want me to tell you? I would love that. And just like that, Elijah launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the difference between velociraptors and Deinonychus, complete with hand gestures and sound effects. Marcus listened with complete attention, asking questions, responding with genuine interest. Watching them together, Vivian felt hope kindle for the first time since arriving in Newport. They could do this. It would be complicated and messy and difficult, but they could do this. For Elijah's sake, they could find a way forward. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. Marcus stayed close, not hovering but present. He and Elijah talked about dinosaurs, then space, then what Elijah wanted to be when he grew up. A paleontologist, or an astronaut, or maybe someone who builds spaceships, he can't decide. Marcus shared that he builds buildings, which Elijah thought was almost as cool as spaceships. When it was time to leave, Elijah surprised everyone by hugging Marcus goodbye. It was quick and spontaneous, a child's instinctive affection for someone who'd paid attention to him. Marcus looked stunned, his arms coming up awkwardly to return the embrace. Bye, Marcus. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow at the wedding? Marcus looked at Vivian, who nodded slightly. I'll definitely be there. As Vivian drove Elijah back to their hotel, he chattered about the evening, about the cake and the fancy mansion, and the nice man who knew about dinosaurs. He fell asleep before they reached the hotel, exhausted from excitement. Vivian carried him to their room, got him into pajamas, and tucked him into bed. She stood watching him sleep for a long time, this beautiful boy who was about to learn the truth about his father. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, the secrets would end, and the real work of building a family would begin. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Is he asleep? Yes. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Thank you for letting me meet him. He's incredible. He is. Another pause. I meant what I said. I'm still angry, but I want to be part of his life. Whatever that looks like. We'll figure it out. Good night, Vivian. Good night, Marcus. She set down her phone and let herself cry. For what had been lost. For what might still be possible. For the little boy sleeping peacefully, about to discover that the father he'd dreamed about was real. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. Vivian woke to Elijah bouncing on her bed, already dressed in his suit pants and undershirt, demanding help with his tie. Can I wear it now? For breakfast? You'll get food on it. Let's wait until we're ready to go to the wedding. But I want to practice being fancy. Vivian laughed despite her nerves. Okay, you can practice being fancy at breakfast. They ate at the hotel restaurant, Elijah sitting up extra straight in his suit, using his napkin with exaggerated care. Other guests smiled at him indulgently. Vivian barely tasted her food, her mind already hours ahead to the conversation she'd have to have after the ceremony. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, can we talk before the wedding? Just for a minute? She arranged for the hotel's childcare service to watch Elijah for an hour, telling him she needed to run an errand. Then she drove to the address Marcus had sent, a small coffee shop overlooking the water. He was waiting at a corner table, 2 cups already ordered. He looked like he'd slept about as well as she had, which was to say, not at all. I've been up all night thinking, Marcus said as she sat down. About everything you told me. About Richard. Vivian wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to hold. I called my lawyer at 3 a.m. Had him pull Richard's files. Do you know when Richard was arrested? She shook her head. 5 years ago. For embezzlement and fraud. He'd been skimming from the company for years. When I finally discovered it, I had him prosecuted. He's currently serving a 10-year sentence. Oh my God. All those threats he made about destroying the company, about exposing your family, he was projecting his own crimes onto you. He was the liability, not you. And if you'd told me what he'd done, I would have stopped him years earlier. The revelation hit Vivian like a wave. 5 years ago. Which meant for 2 years, she'd been keeping Elijah's secret for no reason. Richard had been in prison, and she hadn't even known. I didn't know. I cut off all contact with anything related to you. I didn't follow the news. I didn't search for you online. I was trying to move on. I know. Marcus's voice was gentler now. And I'm not telling you this to make you feel worse. I'm telling you because I want you to understand something. Richard won. Not because his threats were real, but because you believed them. He manipulated you into leaving, and it worked. For 8 years, it worked. Tears streamed down Vivienne's face. I'm so sorry. I know you are, and I'm starting to understand why you did what you did. Doesn't mean I'm not still angry, but I understand. Where do we go from here? We tell Elijah. Today, after the wedding. We tell him the truth, and then we figure out how to move forward. I've already spoken with my lawyer about custody arrangements. Vivienne's heart lurched. Marcus, please don't try to take him from me. I'm not trying to take him from you, but I want to be his father. Actually be his father, not just a weekend visitor. Which means we need to figure out living arrangements, schooling, all of it. I can move to New York. My work is freelance. I can do it from anywhere. Marcus looked surprised. You'd move? For Elijah to have both his parents? Yes, I'd move tomorrow. There's no rush. We'll take it one step at a time. But Vivienne, I want to be clear. I'm not interested in being a part-time father. I want to be fully involved in his life. I want that too. It's what I came here for. To give Elijah his father back. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping coffee, watching the ocean through the window. He really is incredible, Marcus said softly. The way he talks about dinosaurs with such authority. The questions he asks. His imagination. I sat up last night realizing I have a son who's a person, with interests and opinions and this whole personality I know nothing about. You'll learn. You'll have time to learn. 7 years. I have 7 years to catch up on. Then we better get started. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. Vivienne sat in the back with Elijah, watching Isabel and David exchange vows about love and commitment and choosing each other every day. Marcus stood at the altar as best man, his eyes finding Vivienne's across the crowded room more than once. Elijah whispered questions throughout. Why is she wearing white? Why is everyone crying if they're happy? Can I have more cake after this? Vivienne answered in hushed tones, her heart full of a strange mixture of hope and terror. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour before the reception, Marcus found them in the garden. Elijah, would you like to take a walk with me and your mom? There's something we'd like to talk to you about. Elijah looked between them, sensing this was important. Okay. They walked to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the other guests. Marcus and Vivienne sat on a bench. Elijah stood in front of them, his expression curious and slightly nervous. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart. Vivienne took his hand. You're not in trouble. We just need to tell you something important. Something about Marcus. Elijah looked at Marcus with his two perceptive eyes. Vivienne took a deep breath. Remember how you've asked me about your father? About where he is and why he isn't with us? Elijah nodded slowly. Well, I need to tell you something. Marcus isn't just an old friend. He's your father. If you're watching this story and you can feel the weight of this moment, if you understand what it means for a child to hear these words and for a father to say them for the first time, I need you to do something. Take a second and hit that subscribe button for Cedar Drama, because this is where we tell the stories that matter, the ones about truth and courage and the messy, beautiful reality of family. Don't let this be the last story of ours you hear. Subscribe now, and let's keep going on this journey together. Elijah stared at Marcus. You're my dad? Yes. Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. I am. But where have you been? It was the question they'd known was coming. The question that had no easy answer. I didn't know about you, Marcus said gently. Your mama and I were separated before you were born. I only just found out about you yesterday. But Elijah, I promise you, if I had known, I would have been there. For every birthday, every moment. I would never have missed any of it on purpose. Elijah processed this, his young mind working through the implications. So you're really my dad? My actual dad? Your actual dad. Then something shifted in Elijah's expression. Why didn't you tell him about me, Mama? Vivienne's throat tightened. I made a mistake, baby. A big mistake. I thought I was protecting both of you, but I was wrong. I should have told him. I'm so sorry. To everyone's surprise, Elijah's response was immediate. It's okay, Mama. My teacher says everyone makes mistakes. That's how we learn stuff. Marcus let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. So you're going to stay now? Elijah asked Marcus. You're not going away again? I'm not going anywhere. I promise. If it's okay with you, I'd like to spend a lot of time getting to know you. Elijah considered this seriously. Do you know how to play soccer? Not very well, but I can learn. Do you like ice cream? I love ice cream. What's your favorite dinosaur? Probably the Stegosaurus. That's a good choice. Mine's the Parasaurolophus, because of the head crest. Marcus smiled. That's a very sophisticated choice. And then, just like that, Elijah stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Marcus in a tight hug. I've always wanted a dad. Marcus's arms came around his son, holding him like something precious and fragile. His eyes met Vivian's over Elijah's head, and she saw forgiveness beginning to take root alongside the anger and pain. I've always wanted a son, Marcus whispered into Elijah's hair. They spent the rest of the reception together, the three of them. Marcus introduced Elijah to everyone as his son, the pride in his voice unmistakable. They danced together, Elijah standing on Marcus's shoes the way children do. They ate cake, all three kinds. They watched the sunset from the terrace, Elijah between them, chattering about everything and nothing. When it was time to leave, Elijah hugged Marcus goodbye and asked, When will I see you again? Tomorrow. How about we spend the whole day together, the three of us? Can we go to the beach? We can do whatever you want. Elijah beamed. This is the best weekend ever. As Vivian drove back to the hotel, Elijah fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the emotional day. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Thank you. For today. For him. For finally telling the truth. Thank you for giving us a chance. The response came quickly. He's my son. You're his mother. We're family now. Whether we planned it or not, we'll figure out the rest. The next 6 months were a journey of adjustment and discovery. Vivian moved to New York, finding an apartment in Brooklyn close to Marcus's penthouse, but maintaining her independence. They established a custody arrangement that gave Marcus significant time with Elijah while respecting the bond Elijah had with Vivian. Marcus threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he'd once reserved for business. He learned Elijah's routines, his fears, his favorite foods. He attended parent-teacher conferences and soccer games. He read bedtime stories and helped with homework. He made mistakes, plenty of them, but he showed up consistently. Elijah thrived with both parents in his life. His artwork became more vibrant. His questions multiplied. He started calling Marcus Dad without hesitation, the word becoming natural through repeated use. The relationship between Marcus and Vivian was more complicated. They co-parented with careful courtesy, shared meals for Elijah's sake, attended school events together. But the hurt was still there, buried beneath the practical necessities of raising a child together. Until one Saturday in December when everything shifted. Vivian arrived at Marcus's penthouse to pick up Elijah after his weekend visitation. She found them in the living room, surrounded by what appeared to be a failed attempt at building a gingerbread house. It collapsed. Elijah explained unnecessarily, gesturing to the pile of gingerbread and icing on the coffee table. Dad said the architecture was unsound. The architecture was fine, Marcus protested. The icing-to-structure ratio was off. Vivian laughed. This is what happens when an engineer tries to bake. Hey, I'm a developer, not an engineer. Close enough. Elijah looked between them, a slow smile spreading across his face. You're both being silly. It was such a normal moment, such a family moment. And in it, Vivian felt something shift. This was what she'd wanted all along. Not perfection, but presence. Not a fairy tale, but a real family built on truth and effort, and showing up even when it's hard. Can I talk to you? Marcus asked after Elijah had gone to pack his bag. In the study? The study was quieter, away from the gingerbread disaster. Marcus closed the door and turned to face her. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what comes next. Vivian's heart rate picked up. I'm not going to pretend the last 6 months have been easy. They haven't. I've been angry and hurt and confused. But I've also watched you with Elijah. The way you love him. The way you've supported my relationship with him, even when it must be terrifying to share custody. The way you've built this life for him. Marcus, I understand now why you did what you did. Not just intellectually, but really understand. You were young and scared and trying to protect everyone. You made the wrong choice, but you made it for the right reasons, and you've spent 6 months trying to make it right. I can never give back what I took from you. No, you can't. But you can give me the future, if you want to. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. What are you saying? I'm saying I never stopped loving you. 8 years, and I never stopped. And these last 6 months, watching you be a mother, seeing who you've become, I've fallen in love with you all over again. The woman you are now, not just the memory of who you were. Marcus, we can't just pick up where we left off. I know, and I'm not suggesting we do. I'm suggesting we start fresh, date properly, get to know each other again as the people we are now, not the kids we were then. Build something new, together, for ourselves and for Elijah. What if we mess it up again? Then we'll deal with it. But Vivian, we're already family. We're already in each other's lives every day because of our son. Why not try to build something more? Why not give ourselves the chance we never had 8 years ago? Vivian looked at this man who was her past, and possibly her future. The father of her child, the love she'd never gotten over, and she made a choice. Not out of fear this time, but out of hope. Yes, I'd like that. I'd like to try. Marcus smiled, the first real unreserved smile she'd seen in months. Can I take you to dinner? Next Friday. Somewhere nice. Just us. Like a date? Exactly like a date. I'd love that. 6 months later, Vivian stood in Marcus's apartment, now their apartment, watching him read bedtime stories to Elijah. They'd taken it slow, weekly dates that turned into daily calls, conversations that went deep, processing the hurt and rebuilding trust, family outings that felt less awkward and more natural. Moving in together had been Elijah's idea, actually. If you're both my parents and you love each other, why don't we all live together? Hard to argue with that logic. Now, listening to Marcus do silly voices for each character in Elijah's book, watching their son giggle and interrupt with questions, Vivienne felt a peace she'd never known. This wasn't the life she'd planned 8 years ago. It was better. Messier and more complicated and harder earned, but better. After Elijah was asleep, Marcus found her on the balcony overlooking the city. Happy? Very. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood watching the lights of New York glitter like fallen stars. I've been thinking, Marcus said, about everything that happened, all the pain and mistakes and lost time, and I wouldn't change it. Vivienne turned to look at him. What? If we'd stayed together 8 years ago, we would have been different people. Too young, too scared, trying to build a life on a foundation of unresolved fears and external pressure. We probably would have imploded eventually. But this? What we have now? We built this through fire, through truth, through choosing each other even when it's hard. That's stronger than any fairy tale. You're saying you're glad I lied to you and kept your son's secret for 7 years? Marcus laughed. I'm saying that even the worst mistakes can lead to growth if we're willing to do the work. You were wrong to run. I was wrong to not make you feel secure enough to stay. Richard was wrong to threaten you. But all of those wrongs led us here. To a place where we know who we are and what we want. Where we choose each other with open eyes. I love you. The words came easily now. After months of rebuilding, they felt true and solid. I love you too. Always have, always will. Inside, Elijah called out. Dad, can I have water? Marcus kissed Vivian's forehead. Welcome to parenthood, where romantic moments are always interrupted. I wouldn't have it any other way. As Marcus went to get Elijah water, Vivian stayed on the balcony, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. The lies told for love. The truth finally spoken. The family that had been broken and reformed into something new. If someone had told her 8 years ago that she'd end up here, she wouldn't have believed them. But life has a way of surprising us. Of taking our mistakes and shaping them into lessons. Our fears and transmuting them into courage. Our broken pieces and building something new. So what's the lesson in all of this? What's the wisdom hidden in Vivian and Marcus and Elijah's story? First, lies told for love are still lies. Protection that requires deception isn't protection at all. It's control. It's fear masquerading as nobility. Vivian thought she was being selfless, but she was actually making choices for other people that weren't hers to make. The truth is always the answer, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when you're terrified of the consequences. Second, children deserve to know their parents, both of them, whenever possible, and safe. Single parents are heroes, absolutely, but they shouldn't have to be heroes alone. Every child has the right to know where they come from, to have access to both halves of their story. Your fears about how a co-parenting relationship might work don't outweigh your child's need for both parents. Third, forgiveness is a process, not an event. Marcus didn't forgive Vivian in one conversation. It took months of consistent effort, of rebuilding trust, of choosing to move forward despite the pain. Real forgiveness requires time and work from both people. The person who was hurt must choose to release the bitterness. The person who caused harm must do the work to rebuild trust. Both are essential. Fourth, the past doesn't have to define the future. Yes, Vivian and Marcus lost 7 years. That's a tragedy, and it's real. But they didn't let that loss prevent them from building something in the present. They could have stayed stuck in anger and regret. Instead, they chose to move forward, to create new memories, to build a future that honored the past but wasn't imprisoned by it. Fifth, real love is a choice, not just a feeling. Vivian and Marcus felt love for each other for 8 years, but feeling love wasn't enough. They had to choose it, choose to be vulnerable again, choose to trust again, choose to do the hard work of communication and compromise and showing up even when it would be easier to walk away. That choice, made daily, is what makes love last. And finally, it's never too late to tell the truth. Vivian waited 7 years, and yes, that was too long. But when she finally found the courage to speak, healing became possible. If you're carrying a secret that's crushing you, if you've made a choice that's haunting you, if you've kept someone from a truth they deserve to know, today can be the day that changes. Today can be the day you choose courage over comfort. Now I need you to do something. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own choices and secrets and fears, I need you to share it. Hit that share button and send this to someone who needs to hear this message. Send it to the single parent carrying a secret. Send it to the father who doesn't know he's missing his child's life. Send it to anyone who needs to be reminded that the truth, however terrifying, is the only foundation strong enough to build a real life on. And drop a comment. Tell me your story. Have you ever kept a secret to protect someone? Have you ever had to choose between comfort and truth? Your story matters. Your experience could help someone else find the courage they need. Hit that like button right now. Not for me, but because someone else scrolling through needs to find this video today. Your like could change someone's life. Subscribe to Cedar Drama for more stories that matter. Stories about real people facing real struggles and finding real hope. Stories that remind you that you're not alone in your mess, that healing is possible, and that the truth really will set you free. Remember, the best love stories aren't about perfect people who never make mistakes. They're about broken people who choose to heal together, who choose truth over comfort, who choose courage over fear, who look at their mistakes and say, I can do better, and then do the work to actually be better. Vivian brought her son to a wedding to see his father. What started as a secret ended as a family. What began in fear ended in love. What was broken for 7 years was rebuilt into something stronger. The truth will set you free. But first, it will break your heart. And that breaking? That's where the healing begins. This is Cedar Drama, reminding you that it's never too late to choose truth, never too late to choose love, never too late to become the person your child needs you to be.